Hello, and welcome back to the Tactical Pause podcast. I'm Kevin Reed.
I'm Kevin Price.
Glad that you're back with us today. We'd also like to encourage you to please like and subscribe to the podcast. That helps us build a bigger reach, which will help us get more stories, more interviews, and all the good stuff you're looking for. This week, we thought we'd start by talking about political promises. We all know that politicians have to make promises to certain demographics to get elected. The higher the office, the broader the promise has to be. Donald Trump made several promises running for office in every year he ran 2016, 20, and 24. And Kevin Price has been able to kind of keep track of that for us. So take us away, Kevin. What's going on this week?
Yes, so I made a list. I have about 8 things. Some of them overlap a little bit, but I'm going to start from the top. So, the largest deportation operation in U.S. history and completing the border wall. That was one of his main promises. Now, he has increased enforcement. However, I would argue that he has not had the largest deportation operation, and I would also argue that he has done absolutely nothing to improve the border wall, which, by the way, the border spans 1,954 miles, of which prior to his presidency, 650 miles were already fenced. And much of the border wall that was put up previously was just replacing and fixing wall that just needed servicing. So, as far as the border wall, nothing has really been done to that. And as far as deportation effort, obviously we see ICE in these cities and things like that. While he has put more enforcement and more funding on the border itself, I would say it's turned into more of a shit show with the killing of Alex Preddy and so forth. So I'm curious to your thoughts on that as well.
I remember being a private in Fort Huachuca, which is on the Mexican border, right in Arizona, and it's so mountainous. You can't build a wall there. Like it would be a ridiculous escapade to build it around in the Huachuca Mountains. In fact, when you walk, there's certain trails you can take, and there's these little stone markers on certain sides of the trail, and it just says US on one side of it, and on the other side, obviously, if you're looking at it from the US side, it's upside down. It says MEX. That's the border, and it's on a trail in a mountain range. So the border is not really securable with a wall, would be my first thought. Secondly, I would agree with you. I think that the use of ICE enforcement in an interior city like Minneapolis is indicative to me of political retribution and not any way, shape, or form some sort of border enhancement or border enforcement to get out, the violent illegals. I think of the Hmong man that was blind, had a cane, let out in his underwear, and he was here legally. And it just kind of strikes me that the enforcement that we see in the campaign promise of border security, we're going to prevent, drugs and all these criminals from coming across the border. And now you have elderly men being let out in their boxer shorts with a cane and no coat. It kind of speaks to me as the common bait and switch tactic that you would think a shady businessman might employ.
Back to what you said, it being more politically motivated, like these places like Minneapolis and so forth, like they haven't increased a large effort in places like Texas or places along the border. They're not very strategic about it, and it doesn't seem that really is a priority as much as they say it is. I know they love to say that Democrats are all for open borders and all this jazz, but honestly, I'm not for open borders, and I don't think most Democrats are for open borders. However, we want comprehensive immigration reform. So when somebody does try to come over and they're not a criminal, they should be here. The process doesn't take them 10 years to go through so they can become a naturalized citizen, because that's how long it takes for some people. Even DACA, which was kind of a band aid, but it didn't solve the problem. They still had to pay money to be a part of DACA. And a lot of these people can get deported while they're going through the paperwork process. That's my problem, is a comprehensive immigration reform. However, I just don't feel like what Trump is doing is really making anything safer. I just don't see it.
Well, I agree. I don't think it's making anything safer. I think it's building distrust in communities. I think from a certain standpoint, if you are trying to build trust in community to hopefully get some, maybe terrorists or people who are Al Qaeda friendly or people who might be trafficking in drugs or trafficking in people, you've now blown that. That's gone. There will no longer be trust in that community with the federal government or maybe even any law enforcement agency for a long time. It's also going to drive costs up. We know that so many undocumented immigrants are our farm labor that pick the vegetables that we don't want to pick because it's backbreaking labor and it doesn't pay well. So I think that in the hastiness to punish political enemies, in the hastiness to be over aggressive in immigrant communities, the overlook here, obviously, I don't want to talk about the inhumanity of it because the Trump administration doesn't care. So I think we could talk to each other till we're blue in the face about how the way they're going about it is absolutely inhumane, it's undignified, and they're violating human rights laws. I think that that's an understood. I just don't think that anyone on the right really cares. So I think that we have to package that in economic terms. Like your pantry items are going to go up. Canned green beans, canned corn, canned beans, all that stuff is going to go up in price because you're now going to have to pay for labor. Or it's going to become scarce because there's not going to be labor there to pick it. And so there's only going to be what they can muster, and they're going to have to raise the price because they're going to have to pay actual Americans to do it for $15 an hour.
Absolutely. And then another focus, he promised to eradicate drug cartels, which kind of connects to the whole border situation. He said he wanted to label them as a terrorist organization, which he did sign an executive order doing that for drug cartels. And then we're all familiar with the bombing of boats in South America and that type of thing. But it hasn't really stopped the flow of drugs into the United States. And then the people that he's bombed, there's been no confirmation that any of these people are actually drug cartels. So
Right. Yeah.
is it just for show, or is there actually intelligence to suggest that these people really are drug cartels? Because I don't think anybody is for drug cartels trafficking into the United States necessarily, but what are you really doing?
I think you're right. The thing is, usually when you plan an operation, there's a significant amount of intelligence, and you track certain boats and track certain people for so long, you develop what we call patterns of behavior, patterns of life. So you're relatively certain that as you're watching this, these are the people. We know who's likely on this boat. We know likely that this boat is carrying X amount of drugs, and it's okay to destroy it, blow it out of the water, whatever. The problem that I have with it is we don't usually publicize that. We don't go out in front of the media out there and be like, yeah, look at this shit, fucking blew it up, yeah. And so it just kind of feels like this very childish, very adolescent, just cheap show, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like a gold facade over a broken toilet. Is it just, here it is, look at how great it is. Like, oh, great, there's a gold sign, but it's just nothing but shit.
And then the other thing is when they did bomb the boats, they went against the rules of engagement as far as when they did have survivors. Pete Hegseth ordered them to to kill their survivors. And I know everybody's been saying it violates international law, which it absolutely does. However, we're not a part of the international court system, so that's why it's never really impacted the United States because we break international law all the fucking time. We talk shit about other countries for breaking international law, then we do it, but we're not held accountable.
You are correct. We are not party to the International Criminal Court. Oh my God.
Yeah,
I thought we were. Huh.
so we can break international law all day long, and it doesn't fucking matter. Well, it matters, but
Yeah, it does matter, but
nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to come about
yeah.
it, you know? So I don't know. It's just, it's just like a double standard because we call people on shit like that all the time.
I mean, it's hard to get China to understand that we're serious about human rights violations when we imprison more people per capita than the world. It's one of those do as I say, not as I do situations. And I don't think that we look as good on the international stage as we think we do. And I think that's to me the thing about Trump that is the most American. He is how we see ourselves. He is the projection of Americanism with a substance to go with it. And it is just like, all right, yep, we make bombs really well. We got a great military.
Well, you mentioned China. Tariffs have been a big thing that Trump has talked about. He said he wanted to pose 10 to 20% tariffs on imports to protect the American industry, which he has in some cases, but all it's doing is making imported goods more expensive on things like appliances, automobiles, electronics, building materials, and so forth. And so this cost is actually being passed off to the American consumer. For some businesses, it's good. For some businesses, it's not. But for the American consumer, it is absolutely not.
Another con perpetrated by Donald Trump. Yeah, The interesting thing is the town I live in thrives and survives on its mom and pop businesses, and each of them have really felt the pinch. There's a Hallmark store here in town that gets authentic Hallmark ornaments and stuff. Most of those are made in China, so the prices have gone up, which means she has to raise prices. Now, you could also buy that same Hallmark ornament on Amazon, and they can slash that price $5 because they can buy in bulk, so they can have more. And so, are you really going to walk, or I walk because I live 2 blocks from downtown, but are you really going to go to Kate's Hallmark store in Mexico, Missouri and pay $5 more when you could get it cheaper with rising costs everywhere? I think we're all looking where to save money. And so I think that smaller businesses really have had a harder time with the tariffs than, let's say, an Amazon or a Walmart.
And Donald Trump, he was promising that he was going to lower prices and inflation and also expand oil and gas drilling geared at lowering the energy costs. But inflation was at 3% when he took office. It has fallen to about 2.7%, which is less than half a percent. So there is that, but prices are roughly the same, and in some cases, even more still. And then also with his childish efforts, it's led to gas prices going up. There was a lowering of gas prices for a short time, which I think has given Republicans fuel to say, hey, look, he did this. But now that they're going back up again, they seem to be completely ignoring that. And I don't think they're going to go down again anytime soon.
Well, we bombed Kharg Island, which was the major oil distribution facility in the Strait of Hormuz, and it's on fire. I mean, even the price of gas went from 297. I told you that yesterday. Went from 297 when we left to take our dog to dog training class. When we left, it was 330. And now we're seeing it starting to creep up again. Like at some point, we're looking at getting closer to $1 higher in gas prices than it was before he bombed Iran. Talk about a spectacular stepping on the rake, like galactic level stepping on the rake to go about this in such a cavalier fashion that within a month of doing this, you may have raised gas prices overall $1 a gallon.
Well, the thing is, and I've always defended presidents on both sides when it comes to gas prices, because usually presidents have very little effect on gas prices. However, I feel like Donald Trump's like, wait a second, hold my beer. He's like, I'll fucking show you that I can impact gas prices. And now that's exactly what he's fucking doing. It's funny, but it's not funny. It's
Yeah.
almost $5 where I'm at.
I mean, I think about like Sarah and I commute about half an hour, 40 minutes a day, one way to work. So we fill up once a week on gasoline. And when it was I think it was 268 actually when the war started. It's about $34 for us to fill up. Not bad, but we had to budget for it, right? We had to make sure, let's make sure that we don't have too much fun because we're gonna need gas here, here, and here. And now we filled up yesterday, and I think it was closer to like $42. So we're looking at almost an extra $200, $200 a month where we were spending 175. Well, that cuts into our fund budget. That cuts into other things they're going to have to. I mean, you can kind of see the domino effects from that. So congratulations to Donald Trump and the Republican Party for stepping on the rake.
Absolutely. And he mentioned in his State of the Union that there are areas where he's got it below $2 a gallon. I don't know where the fuck that is,
Yeah.
but it goes back to, I think we talked about it last episode, where they just put up ridiculous stats as as he was talking, like there's been zero unemployment and all this bullshit. Like, nobody believes that. I don't think anybody can legitimately say that they went to a gas pump and it's been below two fucking dollars. I just don't think that exists.
There's got to be like one gas station somewhere that's so pro Trump, they're just cutting their wrists on gas. It's below $2 here, Donald. Let's go. Yeah, it's the whole thing is just mind blowingly. It is it hurts my head because of how stupidly dumb it is to do all of these things, and it's just predictable, and it's sad. And at the same time, it's almost like if I wasn't living in the United States, I would be laughing at just the clown car train wreck that is happening in Washington, D.C., because it is just how are we this stupid? How did this go this bad? How did we allow ourselves to pigeonhole ourselves into these conspiracy theories that now are playing out in the real world and are having real world consequences and may draw the world into a war, and it was all avoidable. It's exhausting.
It is very exhausting. Absolutely. And the next thing that he promised was that he was going to shrink parts of the federal government. Now, he did try to do that, and there were a lot of firings. Many of those people were rehired, but things like eliminating the Department of Education, that's something he hasn't been able to do because that takes an act of Congress to actually do that. So I don't see that he has actually helped anything in that way. He hasn't accomplished that. And while he has laid some people off, that goes back to his lie about unemployment, about how he's created all these jobs and there's been 0% unemployment. Like, what are your campaign promises? Unemploying a lot of fucking people. It's like some of these things don't fucking register with people, you know? Or maybe they're just not getting their news from somewhere where they're not hearing that. It seems pretty idiotic.
Or they think it's not going to be them. Oh, it's going to get rid of the person down in accounting that I think is a piece of shit. I'm not going to be subject to this job cut. It's amazing the cognitive dissonance it takes to be in the position to vote for that and not think it's going to affect you. And this is from the same crowd who says you're gonna FA and now you're gonna FO, and they're in the FO stage now, and they're just bewildered by it. It's like they got hit by a truck. Like, well, I voted for the guy. You're assuming that he understands who you are and that you voted for him. I'm sure that he'd make a show about it if you're like, I voted for you, rehire him. He's like, we'll rehire that man. He's not going to get rehired. Trump will do it for the show, but he's not going to do it for the actual benefit of that person. I remember his State of the Union, he had said something along the lines of, for the first time in like so many years, the private sector is the largest employer than the government. You're like, okay, great, but why is that? It's not because you created jobs, it's because you destroyed them. The Department of Education is not setting national school standards. They do help school districts and states develop what we call Common Core standards for understanding. It doesn't tell me I have to teach children to hate white people. It says children by this age need to understand this is how bills are passed. This is how things work in the government. And then the state comes in and says, yes, and by this age, they should know how it works at the state and local level. The Department of Education also deals with issues for students with disabilities, students who need IEPs. IEP is individualized education plans. That is a document that the school uses and that the parent uses to develop a plan for that child's education to give them what is called the highest quality education in the least restrictive environment. When you take that away, there is no mechanism to enforce it. So let's say you're in a rural school district like I taught for a few years, and the school district doesn't have the money for a special ed program anymore. They no longer have someone above them telling them they have to develop that. They can just say, we can't educate your child and you're on your own. And that puts some pressure on families that's not been there. And I just feel like a lot of people don't understand what so many facets of the government do, that they just, because they don't understand it, they just want to get rid of it. They see it as just a cost measure. So that one took my heart out of my chest because I taught for a couple of years. I was like, oh, there are so many rural schools that just don't have enough, and that's going to be a hard choice.
And I don't think they're really taking the time to understand these things. I remember when they created Doge and Elon Musk with the chainsaw and stuff, like you can't go through this with a chainsaw, you know, you have to take time. I mean, if it would I think there needs to be a more efficient government. I'm not against that. From having the idea, they just completely screwed the pooch after that. So many good programs they eliminated. I'm sure you heard them talking about the one with trans mice,
Oh,
which
yeah.
which was transgenic mice, which they were researching to cure cancer.
Hmm.
Nobody like could pull this guy aside and say, "Okay, dude, it's not trans mice, it's transgenic mice." You could have at least got that right. He's got to have like speech writers and people like that. Somebody's got to break this down for him. I sometimes wonder about that when he mispronounces different leaders' names. I mean, some of the names he's butchered, I would probably butcher too. But being the president, having this cabinet of people that are supposed to help you, you would think that somebody would sit down with him and say, "Hey, this is actually how you say this." And I don't know how they miss that much. I don't know if it's just because he's such an authoritarian president that he is just like, no, fuck it, I'll do it myself, and he doesn't get the help, which I imagine is probably what happens.
That's what I think.
It just It boggles my mind. It absolutely boggles my mind. But I want to get to some of the things that he has actually accomplished, which aren't very good. But he said that he was going to withdraw us from the Paris Climate Agreement, which he fucking did that because it's been part of the conservative agenda to not believe in climate change, even though a lot of the reason he wants to take Greenland, which I'm not sure if people know, is because there's a lot of the polar ice caps melting and it's about to open up a huge waterway in that area. So they can acknowledge it in their actions, but they cannot say it out loud. That to me is ridiculous. But as far as accomplishing that, he wanted to do it, he did it. And I'm sure a lot of Republicans are happy about it, but it seems absolutely ignorant to me.
It's amazing that we dare not speak its name, yet we shall use the benefits of the curse for our own benefit. Yeah, it's he's done a lot. The other thing that I think that he's done is he's really kind of put people in camps, right? You know, the left is this nebulous cloud of things that we can just shove into corners, and I think he's done a very good job about that.
Absolutely. And then the other thing that he's accomplished, he wanted to eliminate DEI and different social and cultural mechanisms. He did eliminate federal DEI programs per executive order. He eliminated transgender people in the military. And I feel bad for people that are transgendered in the military because it's been such a tug of war. It's like you can
Oh,
be in, you can't be in, you can be in, you can't be in. For me, I know that there are some veterans that are against people being trans and in the military, but for me, if you are willing to raise your right hand and say that you're willing to give your life for your country, I think you should be allowed to serve. There's so many of these people that are big Second Amendment nuts and they walk around with their AR-15s and their full tactical gear. They're grossly overweight, who didn't have the balls to serve, but somebody else has the balls to serve and they want to tell them, no, we can't serve. Recruitment's down in the military. I don't know if people know that or not. And solving the recruitment issue is get rid of more fucking people. They
yeah.
talked that was another thing they talked about, beefing up the military at the State of the Union. They're not helping. They're just not. None of this is helping at all.
On our Afghan deployment that I was on with Adam and Armando, there was a transgender soldier that was in the S2 where I worked, and he's phenomenal. He found a way around the regulations so he could get his hormone replacement treatments and became a warrant officer. He was a CW2, and then this ruling came down, and all of a sudden, you ain't shit here anymore, cowboy. Get out. Really hurt his feeling. Of course it would. He served. I think he was couple years shy of retirement. Like he was really close. And now, I mean, he's now a state trooper in Washington State where you live. And that was his last duty station was Fort Lewis up there in Washington. So, but it's such a huge loss. Like think about the years of training. Intelligence training isn't cheap because every 5 years you have to have an investigation. That's several thousands of dollars because they go into your financial records, they go into your background. They talk to people who knew you, and then they talk to the people that knew you who know those people. Like, did those people that knew you talk bad about you to these other people? Like, they do a really extensive background check every 5 years. Every school you go to is classified, meaning the buildings have to be constructed a certain way. Airflow is controlled. Water flow is controlled. There are no windows. The instructors have to have clearances, which means that if they're private contractors, they're paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. These classes aren't cheap, and you just tossed someone out that you've probably spent millions of dollars training simply because he was not born with the correct genitalia. Like at some point, we have to realize that people's bits are their own business to deal with. Combat effectiveness comes from the willingness to do the job and the heart to follow it through. That's what is required. If you can do the job and you can make it and you can live up to the regulations and the standards, I don't give a shit if you were born Steve and you want to show up being called Samantha. Great, Sam. The enemy's down that way. I need you to point your weapon down there and just let hot rocks fly. That's all I care about.
And similar has been said about females in combat arms MOSs. Of course, Pete Hegseth said that they're not doing away with females in combat arms MOSs, but he's certainly making it a lot harder with the standards for females. And I know there's also a lot of military members that are against females in combat arm jobs. I'm not against it. While I was only in combat arms for my first enlistment, you know, I think the real reason people don't want them in combat arms is because men are gross. and we like to talk shit, like locker room talk all the time. And we feel like we're not going to be able to do that if a female's around. They say it's other reasons. I had somebody not long ago tell me that somebody in the infantry said, well, psychologically, if something happens to a female, the person's going to have to feel like they have to drop what they're doing to help this person. I'm like, that's in the warrior ethos as far as helping a fallen comrade anyway. Like, what are you talking about? You're just
Yeah.
coming up with some bullshit because you don't want females in combat arms. Like, if you feel completely emasculated because some female can do your job better than you can, then I don't know, fucking work harder. Do something to make yourself better. Stop using that as a fucking excuse.
I think that's part of it too, is there's a lot of men in combat arms who would be afraid a woman would do it just as good as them. That the thing that they feel makes them special and stand out, especially, I'm gonna bet this would be true in the cavalry, because they're some of the thinnest skinned motherfuckers I have ever met. And a woman comes in there and does it better, I bet they'd be like, oh God, there's nothing special about me now. So I don't know. I think it's both of those, but yeah, I think you're right. The whole debate about the transgender thing, it really, I think, centers on, and I think the biggest topic should be on what is patriotism? What do we say is a real patriot? Because I think for so long we've allowed the right to define patriotism in their terms, right? In that you're, New King James Version Bible believing, gun toting motherfucker who ain't gonna take no shit, right? Like that's a patriot. But patriotism isn't defined by specific acts. It's not defined by specific actions or associations with organizations. It's defined by the care of your country, right? The pure definition of being a patriot or to be patriotic is to have love for your country, which you can do in a multitude of ways.
Yeah, and I don't think they know what patriotism is. They think it's saluting the flag and getting a hard on for Lee Greenwood or something, you know. And like I was wearing my veteran cap at a restaurant one time, and this lady walked up to me. This was in Texas, and she walked up to me, thanked me for my service, and she's like, "I want to ask you a question." And this was around the time that Kaepernick was kneeling during the national anthem and everything. And she asked me how I felt about it. And I was thinking, oh, geez, you're not going to get the answer you want. I knew she was looking for me to be against it, but I told her that I felt like peacefully protesting is one of the most patriotic things you can do. She sighed, took a short pause, and was like, well, I respect your opinion. I feel differently about this. And I was like, oh, you enjoy your meal. But they just like it's okay when they protest. It is absolutely okay when they protest because the right protest too. They,
Yeah,
they fucking do. I see it on
I'm
TikTok
not
all
wearing
the time.
that face diaper.
I see them down I-5, you know, with, with signs all the time. And Donald Trump, another thing, he had an executive order to take away censorship from like social media and different media outlets and that type of thing, which I think is an absolute contradiction because he later went on to get on to Colbert, who's now about to lose his show in May because of his bullshit. And he tried to do similar to Jimmy Kimmel, you know.
Yeah,
Luckily, he didn't do that, but he wants to talk about censorship, but then he does shit like that. So I don't think that's very patriotic. You can't cookie cut freedom. They want freedom to be what they want it to be. People act like just because you're on the left and you're a veteran, like you're less of a patriot than somebody on the right.
yeah.
And I've never been one to talk shit about somebody's patriotism just because they're on the right. If somebody served the country, I don't think about that. Thank you for your service. Thank you for what you did. I just want the same respect back.
I think the weird thing to me is anytime I look at a conservative's version of freedom, they're still a slave, right? They have to do certain things. There's certain acts they must perform. There are certain churches that they can belong to. This is who you listen to. This is what you believe. This is the songs that we sing. It is so tribal that there is no freedom in that movement. And to be free in any aspect of that is to be branded a leftist or on the left in that nebulous others cloud. So I almost, there's a lot of me that pities them. They've enslaved themselves to this idea of patriotism based on what can be packaged and sold on TV.
And I've had people tell me, like, when I voted for Hillary Clinton, who I wasn't a huge fan of, but I did vote for her. I mean, I was a Bernie supporter, but I did what I needed to do. And I had somebody that was never in the military tell me that I'm a disgrace to all the people I served with, which really pissed me off
Yeah, it
because
would.
I I served in Iraq, a war that I didn't really agree with, but I bought into it. I drank the Kool-Aid. I went there. I did my fucking job. We've lost people that we've served with, whether directly in combat or through things like suicide. I can't tell you how many people that I've served with that before I know it, I hear that they committed suicide. And it never gets easier hearing shit like that. That has always hit me hard. And going through all that as a veteran and then telling somebody that your service doesn't matter, I'm just like, fuck you. It really pisses.
Especially, coming from someone who's a civilian too, like you fucking know. I've had someone, I mean, I remember being in the military, people finding out that I was a leftist. I felt more accepted there than I did as a veteran leftist and civilians. I can't tell you how many civilians are like, I just can't believe you're a communist. And well, I'm not a communist. Communism would not be working within the same framework of the Constitution. I'm a socialist. At the same time, why would you automatically go to that? There's an automatic fear built in with some of these people that it's almost like the Cold War propaganda never stopped on Fox News. If you're on the left, you're with the dirty communists. You want just government control everywhere. And no, I don't. I want government regulations to prevent people from getting poisoned from corporations trying to cut corners. Right? Read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. That's about the meat packing industry before there were government regulations on meat and how rancid meat was being sold and packaged in casings that had been fallen on the floor. That human meat from machines grinding fingers was being mixed with animal meat, different animal meats being mixed together, everything being cross contaminated, things that we know are bad for you. There were no regulations on then. That's a socialist would want that. We don't want it to stifle small businesses, but we do want mega corporations to pay for their fair share of taxes so we can then subsidize the workers if they refuse to pay well by making sure they have quality housing, access to health care, access to clothing, medical care, the basic necessities of life. These are not hard things. What's not patriotic about that? Why do you think that that isn't loving my country? What I'm saying, I'm still willing to pay taxes into the system, but the system needs to pay back to its people.
Absolutely. And being progressive, we're a unique type of progressive because we see a lot of foreign policy and things having to do with war through a different lens than a lot of people. A lot of times I'm around other Democrats, and when they talk about them sending the National Guard to other states and some of the things that the military is doing in Iran or Venezuela or whatever, I always stand up for our service members. I would say, oh, wait, it's not the service members' fault. It is not the service members' fault. I don't want, like, if you want to blame somebody, blame the administration. If you want to blame somebody about Iraq, blame the administration. Don't blame me. I was doing my job. I was serving my country. I bought into it. I felt like I was supporting America's interest and being there for America's people. I would gladly give my life for my country, but don't blame the service member. So that's where I've always had to step in. I feel like with people on the left sometimes is because they're quick to blame the service member because they see ICE doing stuff like with Alex Preddy, and I think they assume that the National Guard members are doing the same thing when they're really
Mm,
only there for a show of force. They're
yeah,
just walking around with rifles with no ammo, just there. That's
picking up trash. That was the funniest thing to me is like you spent all this money deploying the National Guard, and the only thing they've done is pick up trash.
that's the most
Like
army thing you could probably do.
I laughed at it so hard. I said, I cannot tell you how many times that we would come back from a deployment and all of a sudden Sergeant Major would call me up, Sergeant Reed, I need half your platoon today. We're doing area beautification. These soldiers just came back from a war, Sergeant Major, and they're going to do what now? We're going to pick up trash around posts. Huh. Seems like maybe that's not really worth the paycheck there, Top. He's like, nope, we're going. So part of me laughs at it because I think a lot of people who haven't been in the military don't understand that even the National Guard doesn't want to be there. Even they're like, look, man, it's a paycheck and I'm picking up trash. So, they want to be back in their homes playing their video games in their living rooms or with their families and stuff. And they're just stuck there in this political limbo. So you're right. I do feel bad for them, though part of me is glad that I'm no longer, that I was retired from the service because I don't even want the threat of being called back in. And like, oh, Staff Sergeant Reed, yeah, great. We're going to put you in charge of the litter detail, picking up trash along Highway 1 in Iran. Like, oh, God, great.
Well, the other thing I wanted to talk about, and this has been in the news as of lately, is well, what they're calling the Save America Act, which is a SAVE Act. It stands for Safeguard American Voters Eligibility Act. That's what it stands for. And it's geared towards election fraud, which obviously, I think, as most people know, is almost non-existent. And I have some of the stats here, by the way. As far as non-citizen voters, which is what they're really trying to target, from 2003 to 2023, which is 20 years. It's 20 years. There's been 24 cases in 20 years of non-citizens trying to vote. Now, from 2000 to 2014, there was 31 cases just in general of voter fraud. And many of these were just double voting by mistake or by some kind of election error. So I just don't think this is such a pertinent issue. They're talking about verifying citizenship, which is already done when you register to vote. And it just seems like they're creating extra redundancies to make it harder. And I don't get it. I don't get it. I feel like voting should be easy. It should be the easiest.
Yeah, and I know that like in Missouri, we're now it's mandatory. You have to get the real ID. So you have to. I had to bring in my birth certificate, a social security card, and a bill that says, "Hey, I was born in the United States. Here's my social, and here's a bill that shows you exactly where I live." Right? Bring in those three things. They said, "Ah, you are Kevin Reed. You do live in Mexico, Missouri, and we verify you're a citizen." And they give me the real ID with the gold star. I think it cost me $11. It's my driver's license. If you get a non-driver's license for that, a real ID in Missouri to fly, I think it's $8, right? Why is that not good enough to vote?
That's the thing. You need all those documents half the time to get a fucking
Oh
license.
yeah,
And you
yeah,
need those documents to get a passport, which is another thing you can use. And if you have a military ID or dependent ID, you're obviously a fucking citizen. So what are we really doing here? I mean, how is this changing anything except making it more complicated so a person has to carry more shit to the polls?
I did see that John Cornyn, in an effort to try to save his Senate campaign, tried to one up Dick Durbin this week and say, maybe you can explain why this is a bad idea. Trying to, gotcha the Democrat. He goes, oh, yeah, great. So because women changed their names, you'd have to actually prove that they were born, and then they have to have some sort of certificate that says they were born, or they have to get a passport, which is a poll tax that's about $183, and people have to wait 3 to 4 weeks, which will extend time because we're going to have so many people doing it. And we already use driver's licenses. We already do this stuff. So it's just kind of a waste of time, money, effort, and it's a tax on the people. And like John Cornyn sits there stunned, like, oh, like he finds out in real time. Like, how did you not read this? Like, I understand that it's one of Donald Trump's priorities. Cornyn is in the fight for his life against Ken Paxton. So I'm sure he's trying to show up looking tough and like, I'm going to take on the president's agenda. And then in real time finds out, oh no, this is bad.
Yeah. Senator John Fetterman recently came out that he was not going to support the SAVE Act in its current form, which I know he has obviously, as we've talked previously, been under a lot of scrutiny by Democrats because on occasion, he doesn't vote along lines with Democrats on everything. He's kind of a progressive leaning populist. He is for a lot of
Hmm?
issues like higher minimum wage, strong labor unions, legalization of marijuana, criminal justice reform. He used to be for Medicare for all, but he's still for expanded healthcare. So he does critique a lot of corporate power, and he focuses more on the working class Democrats. But he does support Israel. I mean, I'm against him on that. But I know you and we have a little bit different ideas about Fetterman, and I don't like him because he supports Israel because I don't like that about him. But I think what I like is because of how polarized our country is
Mm-hmm.
right now. And you have like a lot of Republicans that just vote for the same thing because they're Republican. You have a lot of Democrats that vote for the same thing because they're Democrats. I like seeing somebody that is outside of the box and is not afraid to go against the grain if they feel, or maybe if their constituents feel that that's what they need to do.
Let me let me just quantify something real quick. If it was John Fetterman versus any Republican, I would never even consider the Republican for a minute. Like, I think that he does champion the right causes. I remember seeing him before he was in federal politics, and he was a mayor of a town in Pennsylvania, and he did an interview with Jon Stewart, and I was in awe of him. His dedication to his people, the determination to change the trajectory of that town was not just admirable, but you almost rooted for the little guy in the fight, right? You could see he was fighting the bigger power. I think that my concerns with him are that when we start straying, I feel like in some ways he's straying from that, in that were willing to be with Israel and was so clearly a genocide. Not willing, being willing to call that out, it is to me a betrayal of the values of trying to change the trajectory of things that you came from. And maybe that's part of Washington itself, you know. And I know he's had some health challenges. I've had grandparents who have had strokes that have completely altered their personality. I don't know that that's been done for him, but it does make me wonder if that has altered his thought process a bit. At the same time, I think that he could easily return back to that. I'm glad that he turned around against the SAVE Act. I think it is effectively dead in the water as long as the Republicans don't kill the filibuster, which I don't think they will. I think that they understand what's coming in November and that there's not a pathway for Trump to declare a national emergency to
Like, hold
stop the
off on that. We
elections.
might need that.
Yeah. Well, so like our Secretary of State has already come out and said nothing will stop our elections. They are going off without a hitch, you know. But also, I don't know that, like, if you're Iran, are you really gonna, what's in Missouri, that's worth, how are you gonna get something here, and what's worth it, to really go after. So I don't think that there's a lot. I mean, I guess you could go St. Louis, Kansas City, but I would think you'd probably be doing that around the World Cup when they're hosting games. That might be more of a more public target that would be more likely to see activity. But at the same time,
I know. Well, I know he hasn't been as critical in like things like border enforcement. He's been pretty for a lot of that, which I'm not like in general. I'm not against border enforcement, but in the form that it's been taking as of lately, I am against that. So I mean, I get some of the criticism. Now he's also been critical of the Democratic Party and its messaging, which I mean, I'm kind of critical of the messaging too.
yeah,
I think that I mean, Donald Trump, I can't remember the figure, but it was in the low to mid 20 percentile that he got the black male vote, which doesn't seem like a lot, but for a Republican, it's a lot, you know. And I think Democrats are dropping the ball when it comes to minorities a little bit. And I think the reason that is, I'm about to white explain, but honestly, this is for more of the white Democrats because I think everybody else knows what's up. They have a tendency when they talk to minorities in the Hispanic community, Asian community, Black community, to talk to them like, well, because you're a minority, you should automatically support XYZ. You should automatically be a Democrat. And in my opinion, that's kind of insulting to assume that you should just be this way because of the color of your
right.
skin. I mean, why don't you just talk to them like you talk to everybody else? Lay out the issues and let them come to the conclusion themselves. I think that would be a little bit less insulting, and I think that they would probably bring more people over and be losing less people to Republicans.
And I think too, you need a fresher set. The Democratic Party has got a problem with an older generation running in federal office. I think Representative Clyburn in South Carolina is a fabulous orator. I think he's been a great legislator. He's also 85, right? I think that Chuck Schumer had his time, was a great Democratic leader, did great in the Senate, and his time has passed him by. I think the time for when the Republican Party would read a sternly worded letter and say, "Oh, well, let's talk," that time is gone. And so I think that a newer generation of Democrats are not just good for the party, I think needed at this point. I think that when you look at the issues facing our generation, especially, I think we're elder millennials at this, we have had so many recessions. We've been in war, I think, since I was a kid, since the Gulf War in '91. I remember when that kicked off. We used to go buy the Desert Storm trading cards because the money went to support the troops. I'm sure Tops kept most of it, but like you trade like a Schwarzkopf for an Abrams tank. They get all the trading cards, and so it's just we've been since we were kids. This country's been at war pretty much consistently. And in between Desert Storm and Iraq and the Afghan War, you had Bosnia, you had the fall of Yugoslavia, Albania and Kosovo issues. So we've been constantly engaged since I was a kid. So there, there's a lot of things going on that the Democratic Party really needs to grasp with because outside of the conflict, you still have climate change. You still have massive economic inequality from being a country that shifted its economy to being a warmongering economy. We're not producing bombs and bullets. We go into a recession. We don't manufacture anything but those anymore. So, how do we change that? How are we going to change the economy to be more reflective and beneficial to the people while at the same time addressing the issues of the rise of artificial intelligence married with 3D printing? You can 3D print buildings now. So, what are you going to do when your construction crew only needs to be 3 or 4 people? Right? There's a lot of disruptions coming to the global economy that I don't think are being adequately planned for. And I think a younger generation of Democrat will help usher that in, or at least help soften the landing.
I think they get too caught up on, denouncing Trumpism, and they really need to just focus on the core issues. The Republicans are going to stick to the far left crazy shit. Like when it comes to LGBTQ issues, they're going to find the person that identifies as a tree or a cat, and they're going to cling to that, the lowest percentage of people that actually exist, and they're going to say this is an issue. Like I don't know if you saw in Texas, they had a whole bill to take litter boxes out of classrooms in
I
Texas,
did see
which
that.
wasn't
Yes.
even a thing because somebody heard it on a TikTok. You know,
Yeah.
that's what our policymakers are wasting their fucking time on. Nobody's doing that. You're making legislation. Somebody took their time to write this legislation for something that is non-existent. But that's what they do. They cling on to the most extreme of things, like even with the Green New Deal. You know, that was a long fucking thing to read. I read it, and it's fucking long. And the only thing they clung to was cow farts. All of that. That's what you got. But they clung to that because they know it's going to make Democrats seem ridiculous. But what Democrats need to do is just ignore that shit. Just ignore it, stick to your messaging, and you'll be good. That's all you got to do, especially right now, because Trump is not delivering affordability. Trump
On
is not
anything.
delivering. He's not delivering his promises for peace. He's not delivering shit. He's not delivering a fucking thing. So all you have to do is just get your messaging together, and you'll be good.
If I was a Democrat right now, I would come out and say, I am supporting any legislation, if elected, that will allow and the government will subsidize solar or wind generation on private property to supplement what is being done. Because I don't think that we're really going to be able to blunt a lot of that AI data center energy pull. But I'll subsidize you putting solar panels on your house so you don't foot the bill. Yeah, maybe you're feeding into the system a little bit, but we'll help subsidize that. I want to bring your energy prices down, and here's how I'm going to do it. Here's how I'm going to bring your grocery prices down. I'm going to subsidize through the USDA the SNAP program that each dollar that's spent on SNAP at farmers markets or on local produce from local producers now counts $3. $1 equals three. So that's going to subsidize by farmers. And now that's also going to put healthier food in the hands of needy people. So now our people are feeding our people and are benefiting from it. Yes, the government is subsidizing that. However, at the same time, we're boosting our local farms. You're letting people get better nutrition. With the clean energy idea, you're now allowing people to not just generate their own electricity, but decimate their electric bills, which has been a huge issue, especially in rural communities that no longer have city utilities and have had to rely on companies like Ameren to provide electric services to run the power plants. And they have this thing here, it's pretty much dynamic pricing. If you're gone to work and your air conditioning's running and the load's too high, we're going to raise your rate. I can't control my thermostat from 40 miles away. So there was last summer, Sarah and I paid, I think June, July, and August electric bills were almost $500 each across the board. It was $1,500 for the summer to keep the house at 78 degrees. Like that, like we weren't running it at 72. We ran it at 78 while we were gone. And now we're looking at trying to get smaller units in the house and not even run the central air at all, just to see if we can not be spending $500 a month on utilities. But if you could imagine a candidate coming out with plans and ideas that are so specific like that, I don't see how voters don't say, look, you don't have to say Trump is bad. They feel that. They can feel it in their wallet. They can feel it when they go to the grocery store. They can see their portions is stagflation starting to decrease and they're paying the same amount of money. So at some point, you don't even have to say the name Trump. You can just say, hey, look, this is how I'm going to solve your energy problem. This is how I'm going to make sure you get good food. This is how we're going to lower food costs for you. And now all of a sudden, you don't even have to worry about who's in the White House because they know who's there. They know he's not doing shit. And now you have the plan and the way to lead them out of the darkness. That I wouldn't even worry about Donald Trump in the election cycle. I would simply start saying, these are the ideas that I'm willing to support. This is how I'm going to make life better for you now.
We
Right.
need to move past it because there's going to come a time where Trump isn't here anymore. So there's going to be a next generation of politics after him. Things are going to move forward after him. He's not going to be around forever. I mean, I know it's felt like it because we've had at least 3 presidential terms where we've had to deal with this motherfucker, but it's going to end at some point.
Yeah.
So the messaging cannot just be centered around him.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It has to be. We are moving away from this. This has been bad. Here's how we're going to fix things. Here's how we're going to put you on a pathway to dignity and decency in life. So yeah, I think you're right. I think that's brilliant. Hey, so it's been another great week, another great episode. If you have any ideas for what things you want to ask us, you think things that you want us to cover, leave them in the comments below. Let us know what you want to hear about. So do like, do subscribe. Make sure that you hit that follow button if you're on the right service for it. We hope to see you next week. Leave a comment below on what you'd like us to talk about, and we'll see you then.
See you then.